The desert wind that scours the borderlands between modern Turkey and Syria has a memory. If you stand today on the sun-baked plains of Harran, known to the ancients as Carrhae, and listen closely to the silence, you can almost hear the death rattle of a superpower. It was here on a blistering June afternoon in 53 BCE that the Roman Republic suffered a humiliation so profound it scarred the Western psyche for 2 millennia. Crassus, the wealthiest man in Rome and the conqueror of Spartacus, marched 7 legions into the furnace of Mesopotamia. He brought 40,000 men, a wall of iron and discipline. Convinced that the sheer weight of Roman infantry would crush the so-called barbarians of the East. Crassus did not march for strategy. He marched for greed. He possessed a fortune that could buy kingdoms, yet he craved the one thing his gold could not purchase: martial glory to rival his frenemy, Julius Caesar. The Parthian general Serena didn't meet Rome with foot soldiers. He met them with 10,000 horse archers who were light, fluid, and lethal. As the lumbering Roman squares advanced, the Parthians didn't hold ground. They disappeared, wheeling their horses and galloping away in a feigned panic. The Romans, sensing blood, broke formation to give chase. And then came the moment that defined the military soul of the East. While galloping at full speed away from the enemy, the Parthian riders would turn their body backward in the saddle. They drew their composite bows and loosed a hail of armor-piercing death over the rumps of their horses. This was the Parthian Shot. It was the perfection of asymmetrical warfare, where the retreat was the attack and the evasion was the trap.
در دستان من کمان روح سیاه اکبانی رو memoria کردن زبون و تایل و فروسی برای من برای تو
Crassus was annihilated, but it is the legend of his death that offers the most chilling warning for the present day. When the Parthian king Orodes II received the captured Roman billionaire, he didn't simply execute him. He decided to construct a punishment that fit the crime. The king knew Crassus had invaded the East to satisfy an endless thirst for wealth. So, he ordered a crucible of gold to be melted down until it was a searing, glowing liquid. They pried open the jaw of the screaming tycoon and poured the molten metal down his throat. You thirsted for gold, the king is said to have mocked. So now, drink your fill. It's a moment of such visceral brutality that it echoed through millennia, eventually inspiring George R.R. Martin to pen one of the most iconic scenes in Game of Thrones, when the beggar king Viserys Targaryen demands his crown. The warlord Khal Drogo melts down a golden belt and pours it over his head.
A crown for a king.
A crown for a king, Drogo says. But that script was originally written in blood on the Iranian plateau. 2,000 years have passed. The legions have traded Glady for F-35s. The horses have been replaced by suicide drones. But the geography remains, the heat remains, and the trap remains. The United States, the modern Rome, has wandered into the same Iranian plateau, entangled in a web woven by the descendants of those Parthian riders. To understand the fire consuming the Middle East today, we must burn the script of democracy versus theocracy. This is not a story about Islam. It is a story of a civilizational resurrection, of two betrayals in the 1970s that broke the world in half, of a cold, multi-generational game of chess played for the soul of the world island.
This evening, we look at U.S. allies, Imperial Iran and Saudi Arabia, truly pillars of the free world.
To comprehend the fury driving the strategy of the Islamic Republic, one must examine the decade where the modern order was forged in fire, the 1970s. Imagine a fork in the road. Two kings, two allies of the American Empire, stood before the precipice. One was the Shah of Iran, the other, the King of Saudi Arabia. Their fates would diverge based on two American decisions. One a ruthless financial masterstroke, the other a plotted betrayal so deep it became the original sin of the modern Middle East.
The energy crisis deepened today as the embargo continues. We are seeing unprecedented lines at the pumps and rising anger across the nation.
In the sweltering summer of 1974, the United States was bleeding. The gold standard was dead, the dollar was plummeting, and the oil embargo had quadrupled energy prices. U.S. Treasury Secretary William Simon boarded a secret flight to Jeddah with a desperate mandate from President Nixon. Do not come back empty-handed.
We aren't just offering a market for your oil, Minister. We are offering the only vault on Earth secure enough to hold your new wealth.
Simon offered the House of Saud a Faustian bargain. The U.S. would provide absolute military protection to the kingdom. We would sell them the most advanced weaponry on Earth, guaranteeing the throne against all enemies, foreign and domestic. In exchange, Riyadh had to do one thing. They had to price every single barrel of oil in US dollars. And, crucially, they had to recycle those billions of petrodollars back into US Treasury bonds. But there was a darker, unspoken design to this pact. The West was actively plotting against their supposed ally in Tehran. The Shah was growing too ambitious, envisioning an industrialized, sovereign Persian superpower. The secret Saudi deal was designed not just to save the dollar, but to crown Riyadh as the new, compliant anchor of the Middle East, effectively weaponizing Saudi oil production to undercut Iranian influence and keep the Shah in check. In the eyes of the Iranian revolutionaries who would soon rise, this was the ultimate backstabbing. Riyadh had shattered the unity of the oil-producing nations and surrendered its sovereignty to the Federal Reserve. Now look to the other side of the Persian Gulf. Mohammad Reza Pahlavi, the Shah, was the gendarme of the Middle East. He was westernized, secular, and fiercely loyal. He fueled Israel's tanks when the Arabs turned off the tap. But his utility to the West went far beyond regional policing. He was the financial and military life support system of the free world. Flush with unprecedented oil wealth, Iran, under the Shah, invested billions of petrodollars directly into Western and American companies, practically underwriting the transatlantic economy. When the brutal stagflation of the 1970s threatened to shatter the global system, it was Tehran that extended generous, stabilizing loans to floundering European countries. When the crown jewels of Western industry titans, like Fiat and Mercedes-Benz, teetered on the brink of absolute bankruptcy, it was Iranian capital that swooped in to rescue them from the abyss. Militarily, he was the unbreakable American shield. High above the jagged peaks of the Caucasus and the desolate northern steppes, the Iranian Imperial Air Force patrolled the Soviet border for the US around the clock. Iranian pilots relentlessly stared down the Russian war machine around the clock, so Washington didn't have to. He gave the West his wealth, his oil, and the lives of his airmen. He trusted the United States with the naivety of a lover. But when the streets of Tehran boiled over in 1978, not only did the West abandon their friend, They prepared him for the slaughter. In January 1979, as the monarchy was on the brink of collapse, President Carter dispatched U.S. Air Force General Robert Heiser to Tehran. To the Shah's generals, Heiser was supposed to be the cavalry. In reality, he was the executioner. He systematically neutralized the Imperial Army. The commander of the Iranian Air Force, General Rabi, later remarked bitterly, "General Heiser threw the emperor out of the country like a dead mouse." Yet, the knife was destined to twist deeper. The very moment Heiser successfully disarmed the Iranian army, leaving the nation paralyzed, its command structure shattered, and its borders violently exposed, the West sprang its final trap. Recognizing the sudden vulnerability they had just engineered, Washington and its allies actively encouraged Saddam Hussein to attack Iran. Armed with Western backing and a silent nod of approval, the Iraqi dictator was unleashed to annihilate the very nation the West had just deliberately disarmed. The Shah died wandering in exile, consumed by cancer, denied entry by the very allies whose economies he had personally bailed out. This compounding betrayal is the founding trauma of the Islamic Republic. The lesson seared into the psyche of the new regime was absolute. The West has no honor. The United States has no friends, only disposable assets. To rely on Washington is to commit suicide. Saudi Arabia chose wealthy servitude. Iran chose traumatized, impoverished sovereignty. And from that blood-soaked isolation, the phoenix began to rise. Western media often caricatures the leaders in Tehran as irrational mad mullahs obsessed with the afterlife. But if you peel back the turban, you find the helmet of a Safavid general. The men in Tehran are not just clerics, they are the inheritors of an imperial memory. Their ideology is a resurgent Safavid revival. Iran uses the axis of resistance not to spread terror for terror's sake, but to reconstruct the sphere of influence of the Sassanid and Safavid empires. This is the octopus doctrine. The head of the octopus sits safely in the Zagros Mountains, protected by geography that has baffled invaders since Alexander the Great. But its tentacles stretch out to grapple the enemy on distant frontiers. In Mesopotamia, modern Iraq, they have rebuilt their strategic depth. This was once the heart of the Persian Empire at Ctesiphon, and it is now shielded by the popular mobilization forces. In Levant, by saving Assad and arming Hezbollah, Iran had secured the land bridge to the Mediterranean before it gave that up strategically to feign weakness and lay the foundations for the Parthian Shot trap. This has been a dream of Persian emperors since Cyrus the Great. And in Yemen, they have found the flank. By backing the Houthis, Iran has placed a dagger at the belly of Saudi Arabia. The conflict has now evolved beyond bullets to the very arteries of the global economy. The ghost of Crassus is now haunting the trade routes of the world island. In 2023, the U.S. championed the India, Middle East, Europe Economic Corridor, or IMEC. It was a masterpiece of geopolitical engineering. It proposed a trade route linking India to Europe via Saudi Arabia and Israel, bypassing Iran entirely. It was an iron curtain of rail and fiber optics designed to cement the anti-Iranian alliance. Tehran viewed IMEC as an existential threat. If completed, Iran would be reduced to a flyover state, isolated from the wealth of Eurasia. So, they flipped the chessboard. The explosion of violence in Gaza and the subsequent Houthi blockade of the Red Sea must be viewed through this lens. This was not merely solidarity. It was a grand strategic veto. By closing the Bab el-Mandeb Strait, the axis of resistance effectively froze the IMEC project, who will invest billions in a railway through Saudi Arabia when missiles are flying over Riyadh. In fact, Saudis have already cancelled their ambitious No-Way mega project, who will ensure ships docking in Haifa when the port is a target, who will vacation in Dubai when Iranian drones are only 5 minutes away. While the American corridor burns, Iran is racing to complete its own. The international north-south transport corridor connects Russia and India through Iran, bypassing the Suez Canal and the American Navy entirely. It is the artery of the resistance economy. the physical backbone of a new world order. Tehran has calculated that the United States is a declining empire, overextended and internally fractured, much like Rome in its twilight. They have watched the chaotic withdrawals from Iraq and Afghanistan. They know they cannot defeat the US Navy in a direct confrontation that would be suicide. So they play the Parthian game. History doesn't repeat itself, but it does rhyme. From the dusty plains of Carrhae to the shipping lanes of the Red Sea, the story is the same. An empire, blinded by its own power and greed, marches into a trap set by an enemy that understands its own terrain, its own history, and the timeless art of the Parthian Shot. The question for us today is, as we stare into the crucible of a new world order, are we holding the ladle, or are we the ones about to drink? Thanks for watching. If you found this journey through history compelling, be sure to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell to join us on our next deep dive. See you next time.